Welcome to the Reiki Church of Cosmic Convergence. This is Transmission 3. The Supreme Fact of Human Life, Part 2. There is the soul life direct from God. It is that relates us to the infinite. There is then the physical life. This it is that relates us to the material universe about us. The thought life connects the one with the other. It is this that plays between the two. Before we proceed further, let us consider very briefly the nature of thought. Thought is not, as is many times supposed, a mere indefinite abstraction, or something of a like nature. It is, on the contrary, a vital, living force, the most vital, subtle, and irresistible force there is in the universe. In our very laboratory experiments, we are demonstrating the great fact that thoughts are forces. They have form and quality and substance and power, and we are beginning to find that there is what we may term a science of thought. We are beginning also to find that through the instrumentality of our thought forces we have creative power, not merely in a figurative sense, but creative power in reality. Everything in the material universe about us, everything the universe has ever known, had its origin first in thought. From this it took its form. Every castle, every statue, every painting, every piece of mechanism, everything had its birth, its origin first in the mind of the one who formed it, before it received its material expression or embodiment. The very universe in which we live is the result of the thought energies of God, the infinite spirit that is back of all. And if it is true, as we have found, that we and our true selves are in essence the same, and in this sense are one with the life of this infinite spirit, do we not then see that in the degree that we come into a vital realization of this stupendous fact, we, through the operation of our interior spiritual thought forces, have in like sense creative power? Everything exists in the unseen before it is manifested or realized in the seen. And in this sense it is true that the unseen things are the real, while the things that are seen are the unreal. The unseen things are cause, the seen things are effect. The unseen things are the eternal, the seen things are the changing, the transient. The power of the word is a literal scientific fact. Through the operation of our thought forces we have creative power. The spoken word is nothing more nor less than the outward expression of the workings of these interior forces. The spoken word is then, in a sense, the means whereby the thought forces are focused and directed along any particular line. And this concentration, this giving them direction, is necessary before any outward or material manifestation of their power can become evident. Much is said in regard to building castles in the air, and one who is given to this building is not always looked upon with favor. But castles in the air are always necessary before we can have castles on the ground, before we can have castles in which to live. The trouble with the one who gives himself to building castles in the air is not that he builds them in the air, but that he does not go further and actualize in life, in character and material form, the castles he thus builds. He does a part of the work, a very necessary part, but another equally necessary part remains still undone. There is in connection with the thought forces what we may term the drawing power of mind, and the great law operating here is one with that great law of the universe, that like attracts like. We are continually attracting to us from both the seen and the unseen side of life forces and conditions most akin to those of our own thoughts. This law is continually operating whether we are conscious of it or not. We are all living, so to speak, in a vast ocean of thought, and the very atmosphere around us is continually filled with the thought forces that are being continually sent or that are continually going out in the form of thought waves. We are all affected more or less by these thought forces, either consciously or unconsciously, and in the degree that we are more or less sensitively organized, or in the degree that we are negative and so are open to outside influences, rather than positive, thus determining what influences shall enter into our realm of thought and hence into our lives. There are those among us who are much more sensitively organized than others. As an organism, their bodies are more finely, more sensitively constructed. These, generally speaking, are people who are always more or less affected by the mentalities of those with whom they come in contact, or in whose company they are. A friend, the editor of a great journal, is so sensitively organized that it is impossible for him to attend a gathering, such as a reception, talk and shake hands with a number of people during the course of the evening, without taking on to a greater or lesser extent their various mental and physical conditions. These affect him to such an extent that he is scarcely himself and in his best condition for work until some 2 or 3 days afterwards. Some think it unfortunate for one to be sensitively organized. By no means. It is a good thing, for one may thus be more open and receptive to the higher impulses of the soul within, and to all higher forces and influences from without. It may, however, be unfortunate and extremely inconvenient to be so organized, unless one recognize and gain the power of closing himself, of making himself positive to all detrimental or undesirable influences. This power everyone, however sensitively organized he may be, can acquire. This he can acquire through the mind's action. And moreover, there is no habit of more value to anyone, be he sensitively or less sensitively organized, than that of occasionally taking and holding himself continually in the attitude of mind, I close myself, I make myself positive to all things below, and open and receptive to all higher influences, to all things above. By taking this attitude of mind consciously now and then, it soon becomes a habit, and if one is deeply in earnest in regard to it, it puts into operation silent but subtle and powerful influences in effecting the desired results. In this way, all lower and undesirable influences from both the seen and the unseen side of life are closed out, while all higher influences are invited, and in the degree that they are invited will they enter. And what do we mean by the unseen side of life? First, the thought forces, the mental and emotional conditions in the atmosphere about us that are generated by those manifesting on the physical plane through the agency of physical bodies. Second, the same forces generated by those who have dropped the physical body, or from whom it has been struck away, and who are now manifesting through the agency of bodies of a different nature. The individual existence of man begins on the sense plane of the physical world, but rises through successive gradations of ethereal and celestial spheres, corresponding with his ever-unfolding deific life and powers, to a destiny of unspeakable grandeur and glory. Within and above every physical planet is a corresponding ethereal planet, or soul world, as within and above every physical organism is a corresponding ethereal organism, or soul body, of which the physical is but the external counterpart and materialized expression. From this etherealized or soul planet, which is the immediate home of our arisen humanity, there arises or deepens in infinite gradation spheres within and above spheres, to celestial heights of spiritualized existence utterly inconceivable to the sense man. Embodiment, accordingly, is twofold, the physical being but the temporary husk, so to speak, in and by which the real and permanent ethereal organism is individualized and perfected. Somewhat as the full corn in the ear is reached by means of its husk, for which there is no further use. By means of this indestructible ethereal body and the corresponding ethereal spheres of environment with the social life and relations in the spheres, the individuality and personal life is preserved forever. The fact of life in whatever form means the continuance of life, even though the form be changed. Life is the one eternal principle of the universe, and so always continues, even though the form of the agency through which it manifests may be changed. Surely, because the individual drops has gone out of the physical body, there is no evidence at all that the life does not go right on the same as before, not commencing, for there is no cessation, but commencing in the other form, exactly where it has left off here. For all life is a continuous evolution, step by step. There one neither skips nor jumps. There are in the other form, then, mentalities, and hence lives of all grades and influences, the same as there are in the physical form. If, then, the great law that like attracts like is ever operating, we are continually attracting to us from this side of life influences and conditions most akin to those of our own thoughts and lives. A gruesome thought that we should be so influenced, says one. By no means. All life is one. We are all bound together in the one common and universal life, and especially not when we take into consideration the fact that we have it entirely in our own hands to determine the order of thought we entertain, and consequently the order of influences we attract, and are not mere willowy creatures of circumstance, unless indeed we choose to be. In our mental lives we can either keep hold of the rudder and so determine exactly what course we take, what points we touch, or we can fail to do this, and failing we drift and are blown hither and thither by every passing breeze. And so on the contrary, welcome should be the thought, for thus we may draw to us the influence and the aid of the greatest, the noblest, and the best who have lived on the earth, whatever the time, wherever the place. We cannot rationally believe other than that those who have labored in love and with uplifting power here are still laboring in the same way, and in all probability with more earnest zeal, and with still greater power. Science is so abundantly demonstrating today the things that we see are but a very small fraction of the things that are. The real vital forces at work in our own lives and in the world about us are not seen by the ordinary physical eye. Yet they are the causes of which all things we see are merely the effects. Thoughts are forces. Like builds like, and like attracts like. For one to govern his thinking, then, is to determine his life. Says one of deep insight into the nature of things. The law of correspondences between spiritual and material things is wonderfully exact in its workings. People ruled by the mood of gloom attract to them gloomy things. People always discouraged and despondent do not succeed in anything, and live only by burdening someone else. The hopeful, confident, and cheerful attract the elements of success. A man's front or backyard will advertise that man's ruling mood in the way it is kept. A slattern advertises the ruling mood of hopelessness, carelessness, and lack of system. Rags, tatters, and dirt are always in the mind before being on the body. The thought that is most put out brings its corresponding visible element to crystallize about you as surely and literally as the visible bit of copper in solution attracts to it the invisible copper in that solution. A mind always hopeful, confident, courageous, and determined on its set purpose, and keeping itself to that purpose, attracts to itself out of the elements things and powers favorable to that purpose. Every thought of yours has a literal value to you in every possible way. The strength of your body, the strength of your mind, your success in business, and the pleasure your company brings others, depends on the nature of your thoughts. In whatever mood you set your mind, does your spirit receive of unseen substance in correspondence with that mood. It is as much a chemical law as a spiritual law. Chemistry is not confined to the elements we see. The elements we do not see with the physical eye outnumber 10,000 times those we do see. The Christ injunction, "Do good to those who hate you," is based on a scientific fact and a natural law. So, to do good is to bring to yourself all the elements in nature of power and good. To do evil is to bring the contrary destructive elements. When our eyes are opened, self-preservation will make us stop all evil thought. Those who live by hate will die by hate. That is, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. Every evil thought is as a sword drawn on the person to whom it is directed. If a sword is drawn in return, so much the worse for both. And says another who knows full well whereof he speaks, the law of attraction works universally on every plane of action, and we attract whatever we desire or expect. If we desire one thing and expect another, we become like houses divided against themselves, which are quickly brought to desolation. Determine resolutely to expect only what you desire, then you will attract only what you wish for. Carry any kind of thought you please about with you, and so long as you retain it, no matter how you roam over land or sea, you will unceasingly attract to yourself, knowingly or inadvertently, exactly and only what corresponds to your own dominant quality of thought. Thoughts are our private property, and we can regulate them to suit our taste entirely by steadily recognizing our ability to do so. We have just spoken of the drawing power of mind. Faith is nothing more nor less than the operation of the thought forces in the form of an earnest desire, coupled with expectation as to its fulfillment. And in the degree that faith, the earnest desire thus sent out, is continually held to and watered by firm expectation, in just that degree does it either draw to itself, or does it change from the unseen into the visible, from the spiritual into the material, that for which it is sent. Let the element of doubt or fear enter in, and what would otherwise be a tremendous force will be so neutralized that it will fail of its own realization. Continually held to and continually watered by firm expectation, it becomes a force, a drawing power, that is irresistible and absolute, and the results will be absolute in direct proportion as it is absolute. We shall find, as we are so rapidly beginning to find today, that the great things said in regard to faith, the great promises made in connection with it, are not mere vague sentimentalities, but are all great scientific facts, and rest upon great immutable laws. Even in our very laboratory experiments, we are beginning to discover the laws underlying and governing these forces. We are now beginning, some at least, to use them understandingly and not blindly, as has so often and so long been the case. Much is said today in regard to the will. It is many times spoken of as if it were a force in itself. But will is a force, a power, only insofar as it is a particular form of the manifestation of the thought forces. For it is by what we call the will that thought is focused and given a particular direction, and in the degree that thought is thus focused and given direction, it is effective in the work it is sent out to accomplish. In a sense, there are two kinds of will, the human and the divine. The human will is the will of what, for convenience's sake, we may term the lower self. It is the will that finds its life merely in the realm of the mental and the physical, the sense will. It is the will of the one who is not yet awake to the fact that there is a life that far transcends the life of merely the intellect and the physical senses, and which, when realized and lived, does not do away with or minimize these, but which, on the contrary, brings them to their highest perfection and to their powers of keenest enjoyment. The divine will is the will of the higher self, the will of the one who recognizes his oneness with the divine, and who consequently brings his will to work in harmony, in conjunction with the divine will. The human will has its limitations. So far and no farther, says the law. The divine will has no limitations. It is supreme. All things are open and subject to you, says the law, and so in the degree that the human will is transmuted into the divine, in the degree that it comes into harmony with, and so acts in conjunction with the divine, does it become supreme. Then it is that thou shalt decree a thing, and it shall be established unto thee. The great secret of life and of power, then, is to make and to keep one's conscious connection with this infinite source. The power of every life, the power of life itself, is determined by what it relates itself to. God is immanent as well as transcendent. God is creating, working, ruling in the universe today, in your life and in mine, just as much as he ever has been. We are too apt to regard God after the manner of an absentee landlord, one who has set into operation the forces of this great universe, and then taken himself away. In the degree, however, that we recognize him as immanent as well as transcendent, are we able to partake of his life and power. For in the degree that we recognize him as the infinite spirit of life and power that is today, at this very moment working and manifesting in and through all, and then in the degree that we come into the realization of our oneness with this life, do we become partakers of, and so do we actualize in ourselves the qualities of his life. In the degree that we open ourselves to the inflowing tide of this immanent and transcendent life, do we make ourselves channels through which the infinite intelligence and power can work. It is through the instrumentality of the mind that we are enabled to connect the real soul life with the physical life, and so enable the soul life to manifest and work through the physical. The thought life needs continually to be illumined from within. This illumination can come in just the degree that through the agency of the mind we recognize our oneness with the divine, of which each soul is an individual form of expression. This gives us the inner guiding which we call intuition. Intuition is to the spiritual nature and understanding practically what sense perception is to the sensuous nature and understanding. It is an inner spiritual sense through which man is open to the direct revelation and knowledge of God, the secrets of nature and life, and through which he is brought into conscious unity and fellowship with God, and made to realize his own deific nature and supremacy of being as the child of God. Spiritual supremacy and illumination thus realized through the development and perfection of intuition under divine inspiration gives the perfect inner vision and direct insight into the character, properties, and purpose of all things to which the attention and interest are directed. It is, I repeat, a spiritual sense opening inwardly, as the physical senses open outwardly, and because it has the capacity to perceive, grasp, and know the truth firsthand, independent of all external sources of information, we call it intuition. All inspired teaching and spiritual revelations are based upon the recognition of this spiritual faculty of the soul, and its power to receive and appropriate them. Conscious unity of humans in spirit and purpose with God, born out of his supreme desire and trust, opens the soul through this inner sense to immediate inspiration and enlightenment from the divine omniscience and the cooperative energy of the divine omnipotence, under which he becomes a seer and a master. On this higher plane of realized spiritual life in the flesh, the mind holds the impersonal attitude and acts with unfettered freedom and unbiased vision, grasping truth firsthand, independent of all external sources of information. Approaching all beings and things from the divine side, they are seen in the light of the divine omniscience, God's purpose in them, and so the truth concerning them, as it rests in the mind of God, are thus revealed by direct illumination from the divine mind, to which the soul is open inwardly through this spiritual sense we call intuition. Some call it the voice of the soul, some call it the voice of God, some call it the sixth sense. It is our inner spiritual sense. In the degree that we come into the recognition of our own true selves, into the realization of the oneness of our life with the infinite life, and in the degree that we open ourselves to this divine inflow, does this voice of intuition, this voice of the soul, this voice of God speak clearly. And in the degree that we recognize, listen to, and obey it, does it speak ever more clearly, until by and by there comes the time when it is unerring, absolutely unerring in its guidance.